Welcome to the Hustle or Bust podcast powered by Paverart. Our mission is simple: to dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship, small business, and all the success, struggle, and challenges that need to be confronted in the pursuit of growth. We celebrate the entrepreneurial spirit, but perhaps most important, we want you to learn at least one idea that you can put into action immediately to make your investment in time worthwhile.
In business, we often think about the obvious functional areas that we need to improve upon: sales, marketing, operations, and customer service. But episode 36, we dive into something different. It's what I call the mental freight train. Our own personal struggles to see the world with the clarity and focus that's needed, to suspend judgment, and to build great teams. We hope you enjoy, and drop us a line with some feedback.
This is an impromptu podcast. We decided to do this because we were having a discussion in the office that we realized was actually very, very, very important to talk about. And why were we wasting our time talking about it in the office when we actually should put it on video and also on a podcast? And it's hard to describe exactly what it was we were talking about specifically. You know, we're not talking about inventory. We're not talking about entrepreneurship. We're not talking about work ethic. We're talking about something that's more tied to the mental health area than anything else. Kind of a tricky area to talk about. But we really need to start based on, Mark, what you were talking to me about. And can you give us a little bit of background on that?
Sure. Hey, you and I growing up, we were talking a little bit about this. Did we ever hear the word mental health?
Never.
I don't think we did.
I don't believe so.
What triggered this? I've been struggling on a blog post probably for about 10 days or so. We got this sweetheart of a client. Shout out to Mr. Joseph Connolly. I'm writing a blog post talking about that. It's a military project. It's a customized Compass Rose, but just a grade A, salt of the earth individual.
Sure.
That was gracious enough with 45 minutes of his time that we kind of got on a Zoom call and we talked about it. We had a great conversation, and I'm in the process of writing this out. I've talked about I struggle with writing, but really what I started thinking about was mental health. Mm-hmm. Dominic and I were on a walk the other day, taking the two pugs out for a walk at 6 a.m. before school starts, and Dominic said something to the effect of, so-and-so has anxiety issues. So in my mind, I'm thinking anxiety issues. And my mind starts going a little bit. I don't think I ever heard the term anxiety issues as described about another teenager growing up. So I started thinking about mental health. And do you think it's like a stigma or so, particularly with males?
Well, before you go on, what was your initial response to Dom when that was brought up, or whether you said it to Dom or not? But what was your internal response to that?
Well, I said it out loud. Shocker. I thought it and then I said it. When I was your age, Dom, anxiety issues wasn't something people talked about. And I was kind of saying it half joking, but half serious. Sure. That's the truth. We never talked about this, but I was trying to understand. But then as he's talking, he's telling me about, what do you mean by anxiety issues? I'm thinking, that smartphone was never in my hand in 1988, was it? Social media wasn't on that thing. And these kids, whether it's bullying, all this madness of online, it follows them everywhere. So, okay, we're in a different time nowadays, and my mind automatically went to, this is just the softening of America. I didn't say that, but I did think it. And then I started thinking more and more about some of the challenges that people have. We had a CEO, remember the infamous crying CEO that came on, and we spent a good 20 minutes talking about mental health. So anyway, that was, I think it's in that category. As it relates to this blog post, I've struggled. I wouldn't call that mental health challenges, but writing is just flat out hard. I described a little bit about some of the stuff that I struggle with mentally, particularly in the early morning. But that's what got us onto this conversation when you said, let's call time out and let's put this on air, this topic, because there could be other people that deal with these types of things.
When you have a little different schedule than I do. You try to get a walk in before you come to work in the morning, and that's at the ungodly hour of 3 o'clock in the morning or thereabouts. I shouldn't say that because we're both on the same schedule, and it's it's just normal. After you do it for years, it just becomes normal. Who cares whether it's 3 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning? It doesn't really matter. Your body clock, your organic clock gets used to that. But you described to me something that occurs to you that, and I won't use the term, I want you to use the term, that is it's a tremendous rush of information that's hitting you all at once at one time, and it's during that walk. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's I don't know if you remember they used to put the lottery on TV live.
Oh yeah,
Saturday nights at 8 o'clock, and you had like 75 ping pong balls.
Yep.
And a vacuum machine. They'd be that's probably the best
pinging
analogy.
Around. Yeah,
pinging
exactly.
around. That's my brain, especially in the morning when I wake up and I get a good night's sleep. If I get 6 hours at least, my mind. I think this is probably a little abnormal or not the normal, but it's like that. If you can picture that machine and turn it on max speed, that's what it does. And I've learned to kind of live with it and deal with it the best I know how. But when I wake up at 3:30, and if I get a good night's sleep and a decent sleep, that ping pong machine turns on, and it's hard to deal with if I don't have a strategy to deal with it. And I'll give you an example. In Memphis, Tennessee, I moved there when I was, I guess, 31 years old. I used to go to, I think it was 4:30 a.m. spin class. And I was describing how my mind works in the spin class once, and people looked at me like I got 10 heads. Well, spin class, it goes from, you're going up the hill to simulate what a bike ride is, but a lot of it is sprinting, and your legs are going like this. Well, as my legs are going like this, I'm counting every single revolution. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Count.
I'm counting. And this is
every
going on.
revolution.
I'm sweating the pour. It's coming down, and I'm counting the revolutions up until the point when we did the hill climb, which is like once every 12 minutes. So my mind will be counting revolutions until the hill climb, and I thought this was kind of normal. So I'm describing this, and I'm around a table of people, and I'm getting these weird looks like, you're doing what? I'm counting. And you're counting slow, you're counting fast, but you're counting for 60 minutes as you're sweating. And people are looking at me. I'm like, all right, maybe this is not normal brainwave activity.
Sure.
All right, so fast forward now to where I am in the 40s. So I'm 49, turned 50 in December. The freight train is not like that because I don't have anything to occupy. As I'm walking through town, it's the onslaught of activity in the brain that relates to what Dominic was talking about. Anxiety.
Okay, gotcha.
Right? It's all right. So we went through, you mentioned we haven't done a podcast in 3 months. We ain't sitting around doing nothing. This room is brand new. We were doing construction. We were putting a new water jet in. We're doing like 35 things. So there's good excuses for why we weren't. Well, in that
So, by the way, so naturally we do 2 podcasts in one day.
Yeah, exactly. So now we got to catch up and make up for lost time. So the anxiety, the ping pong ball machine is, oh my God, we got an inspection next week. What if we fail the inspection? If we fail the inspection, do they red tag us? If they red tag us, does that mean I have to shut down? And what do I do with the people if they get shut down? Would they shut down both sides? Would they shut down this side? And then what do I do? Do I have to, do we keep people on a payroll? I got to keep them on a payroll. What if we lose the people? And this goes on for a half hour. And it's question after question. And it's what I call the mental freight train. It doesn't stop. And it's like, it happens every day. So if I get a good night's sleep, the only time it doesn't is if I'm not firing. So it starts, I'm walking through town and I've learned.
Does it dissipate at all?
It does. But I've learned, and I watch this because I'm analytical, right? If I start at 4 a.m., the walk, this goes on full steam like that until 4:30. I've learned it. Just succumb to it, right?
Sure.
At 4:30, at about a half hour, it slows, maybe at half the rate, right? I don't know if that's the endorphins. I don't know if that's the heart rate. I don't know what it is, but it slows dramatically at a half hour. And then, by the way, at the half hour mark, I hit the 24-hour convenience store. There's a 24. They got coffee, so I go in there, and that's kind of like optimism. Get a cup of coffee in the morning is a great thing for a coffee drinker.
Sure.
So I get that, and then by 4:45, it starts to slow down almost to a crawl. But it still is there, right? At minute 60, almost somewhere between minute 55 and 65, if I'm walking that long, and I need to stop the brain, it stops to a crawl, and then productive thoughts start coming in. The anxiety goes away, and I start thinking about, all right, the word gratitude comes to mind. If you just stop this, and I can't do it until 60 minutes comes along, what is all the good things that are going on in your life? My daughter, my wife, my son, the business, the new employee, and it starts reversing course.
Gotcha.
So it turns from anxiety to productive, but it only happens at minute 60. So when I say I succumb to it, this ain't going away. And I've thought about times, there's probably medication that can solve this. I don't know if it's a problem. I've dealt with it, but
You're
it's
how
probably
old?
not normal.
How old are you?
49.
49 years old. This has been going on for how many years?
20?
You haven't taken medication for something
No,
like
never.
that, and not even thought that was that you know.
I did get prescribed medication when I was 28 years old. I was in a board meeting, Sarah Lee, one of my life mentors, Wes Jackson. We were in a difficult, we called a month, they were called barrels. They were, which gives you a little insight into the intensity of the rooms.
Right.
And it was right around 9/11, kind of traumatic experience. The HR guy comes in and tells our CEO what happened down there, and I was getting my ass whooped for something stupid. It was like overspending on some small category, and we hear about 9/11, and he's like, oh, yeah, some stuff's going on in New York City. And my sister worked in New York City.
Right.
And then he resumes the ass whooping on me, and I'm like, this is freaking crazy. So I'm driving home at night thinking, this is nuts. I go for a checkup, and he prescribed Ativan, I think it was called, or Adderall or Ativan or something.
Was it something for like an AD?
He thought it was a panic attack. Some of this stuff.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I got home,
Whatever
I looked
it
at
was.
it, and I flushed it down the toilet. I'm like, look, this is controllable, but if I got to go down medication at 28 years old because I can't deal with stress or whatever it was, I get why you do. And by the way, I'm making no judgment.
And that was
People that
21 years ago.
This is
now.
20. Yeah, this is 20 plus years ago in
Right.
Cincinnati. So that was a little bit of a wake up call. Turns out it was the best thing that ever happened. I moved back, tried to have kids. So anyway, the mental freight train. I don't know if this is mental health or this is just remember that neurodiversity piece that we did?
Sure.
That term resonated with me. They were all wired differently mentally. But the mental freight train, I got to think, I don't think that's the norm. But it's something that I've learned. It's not a bother to me. It doesn't take away from my quality of life. But I do think it's somewhat unique. And I don't know how unique. But that day when I was in a board meeting or a team meeting in Memphis, and people looked at me like, that's a little nuts. You're counting the revolutions? And I thought nothing of it. I just kind of casually said it.
Sure.
So that was the first awareness that I was given that something a little different is going on up there.
But we agreed when we were in the middle of this discussion that you know what, this might not be just you. There's probably a lot of people out there. Look, you've been very successful at virtually everything that you've ever done. You've been really, really successful at. And I'm not saying that this particular thing that happens to you might have been part of that success for whatever stupid reason. I don't know. But the bottom line is you've either made it work for you or you've learned how to deal with it. Okay? I got to believe that there's other people out there that, if not directly relatable to what you said, they're on the periphery of what you said. And they may believe that, you know what, he's onto something here. This is something that's, yes, I have to deal with something very, very similar to that. Well, since we're being honest, by the way, let's finish that thought out a little bit. I mean, does it bother you?
No, it doesn't. It's one of those things.
I mean, does being that way bother you? Not the actual activity itself bother you. Does it bother you that it happens?
I've never talked about it publicly.
Right.
So this is the first time, other than that little spin class thing, which is kind of like a novelty that people thought was kind of cute.
Sure.
But I didn't even know what I just talked about it like it was normal, right? Like it wasn't anything that, and I wasn't embarrassed by it, but I kind of knew it would be a funny little story, but I never put two and two together. But
Well, okay.
And when I say two and two together, it's not like it's a big revelation because it's been there for 2 decades or whatever. And
No, but it's really interesting that you brought that up because obviously it was something that it's something that, you know,
when Dominic said anxiety issues,
that triggered it.
when I start thinking about it's the softening of America. They just don't, you know. And I went down the hole, grew some balls. This is just new school shit, and I'm old school here, right?
Right.
I'm of the rock solid values that, you know, grind your way through it, you know, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, all of those cliches. But then I'm saying, what if I never figured out a way to deal with this?
Sure.
And I'm 34 years old, young kids, and the freight train's going, and I didn't have a way to deal with it. So no medication, no physical activity, no nothing to try and...
No therapy.
No therapy, whatever the strategies are, probably 30 strategies. Who knows what happens?
Yeah.
I mean, you think these, not to bring it into a dark area, but these mass shooters, they all happen to be males. They all happen to be young.
Right.
They usually are disaffected from society. They got kicked out. They got bullied.
Some way, shape, or form.
Maybe there's not a male influence in their life. There's probably 30 reasons, but there's some commonality in it. But generally, I think most people agree there's some mental health issues there.
I can't believe that there isn't. There's, look, that's my turn to come clean.
Please.
Okay. And by the way, you spoke that beautifully. I mean, that was from the heart, and it was honest, and that was really...
And I don't know how common some type of mental freight train is. I really don't. But I figured, all right, let's talk about it and see what you think, and I'd love to hear what you think.
Look, what you're describing as the mental freight train can happen, I think, can happen to a lot of people depending on what time of the day it is. I don't know. I took one psych course when I was in college. What the hell do I know? I don't know shit about that kind of stuff. But what I do know is myself. When we started this business, the one thing that I knew I had to do was I had to learn how to deal with rejection. Okay, now that sounds stupid coming from a salesman because you're going to get rejected. Whatever the other side of that closing rate number is your rejection rate.
Right.
Okay? And if you can't learn to deal with that, you're never going to be a good salesman or any kind of salesperson. But the bottom line is that's not what I'm talking about. Far from it. The outgoing Mike Bull, the guy that can sit in a room for 20 minutes and make 10 friends, okay, that's as much a mechanism of fear as it is of, just being a jovial guy. Okay, well, that's just Mike being Mike. Well, no, that's Mike being, that's what Mike needs, okay? I hate the phone calls that I get because I fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
Why did I fuck up? Because I forgot something, I didn't plan properly, and I have to deal with the consequences of that, and I don't like that, okay? Now, you can make all the excuses as you want in the world, but that trigger in my mental capacity and my mental state at that time is incapacitating at times. And
what do you mean incapacitating?
I can't think through it immediately.
Right.
I have to sit back and do something else, or the problem is when you do something else, that never goes away. That negative never goes away. And, so one of my reactions is I got to deal with it right away. We got to get this out on the table. We got to deal with this right away. But invariably, I have to blame myself because I have not done something that I should have done. And, I was told 60 years ago, you need to get this done. You need to plan for this and do it this way and do that. And I didn't do that for that particular instance. But the knee-jerk reaction incapacitates me because a customer calls and says, "What the hell? I expected this here, but you didn't come through. You didn't do this for me. You never called me back." It's
hard calls.
It's a hard call. It's a hard call for anybody, but I think it's harder for me. The point I'm trying to make is it's incapacitating. It just, all you're thinking about is, what did I do wrong? What did I do to cause this? And it's not because you want to learn from the experience. It's like, did I really do this? That's just not the way I operate. Well, it happens a lot when you're in a business where you're getting pinged all day long. But for me, that's easily my biggest loss of sleep. And it's tough. It's tough to deal with. I've never, the term "suck it up." They ought to take that, put it into a little ball, throw it in the damn trash can. Okay, just suck it up. You'll be fine. Well, that's true. But if you have, the accumulation of those things, it makes you start doubting yourself. It can affect your confidence. And I know, look, I'm not stupid. I realize that I might even exude overconfidence sometimes. And I've been told, Mike, you need to tamp that down a little bit. Trust me, it's not easy. But, I'm not splitting the atom, and I'm not, I didn't conquer Mount Kilimanjaro, okay? I'm on the phone talking to clients every day, and trying to manage a business, general manager at a business, with a partner that's doing exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. And by the way, a lot more hours, okay? I now have a better understanding. You're not turning this off, okay? It's hard for you to turn this off. When it was just me and Brian, when it was just me, Brian, and Mick for a while, it's hard to turn it off because your paycheck depends on this. That's okay. That I can deal with, but failure is very difficult to deal with. Very difficult to deal with, especially when you can trace the roots back to something that you did or didn't do. You did wrong or you didn't do it all, and that's what kind of stops me dead in my tracks. And it's hard to deal with sometimes. It's very, very hard to deal with sometimes. But how do I cope? You cope by letting the freight train run its course, okay?
In conjunction with physical activity.
In conjunction with physical activity.
Right.
And doing it that way, at half hour, 35 minutes, things start to calm down. The brain starts to click back into its all this stuff is starting to click in.
Right.
The way I deal with it is to, and then you hear me say this all the time, being a nudge. Mm-hmm. I've been called on this all my life.
It's Italian for pain in the ass.
Pain in the ass. That's exactly right. It's Nugella. Mm-hmm. Okay. Nugella is pain in the ass in Italian. At any rate, but that's how I deal with a lot of that. And I've been called on it all my life. Bosses have told me, but Mike, you got a good crew here. Yes, but, okay? And I can point to more than one instance where something would not have gotten done had I not been a pain in the ass.
So that reinforces itself.
And it just keeps reinforcing itself each time, when in fact, it's wrong.
Right.
You got to be able to pick your battles with that. We got a great crew here, okay? We got a great crew here. And they either forgive me, forget me, or, they tolerate me. One of those three. But at the end of the day, you can fool yourself and say, you know what, that wouldn't have got done if I wasn't a nudge. Not so sure. Not so sure. But that's how I deal with that possibility of not making a mistake. All right? And we just did a podcast this morning with my brother. I look at my brother. You've never met a more calm,
humble.
That's humble, calm. It's just he's just got it. He just seems to have it all together. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We all work impossible hours sometimes, and we do that because the work calls for it. But he never seems to get ruffled. The years that I worked together with him, we didn't fight one time.
Right.
Not one fight. Not one fight. And we're brothers. I mean, that's like kind of a given. Not one time. And by the way, I'm 10 years his senior.
You inform him of that too.
All the time. But, and that's actually not true. I don't have to do that because Ken is, we afford each other the proper respect professionally and familially. That is just the way we are, okay? May not necessarily been the way we were raised, but that's the way we are. Anyway, to make a long story short, that's who I'd like to model myself after. But my brain's not wired that way, okay? Neither is yours. And I think at the end of the day, I'd like to think, I really would like to think that a big part of the, whatever success you and I've had, that's part of it. And it's not necessarily learning to deal with it. We're gaining some sort of positive out of it. There's a little bit of positive in what you go through. There's maybe a bigger positive for me in what I go through. Because if I wasn't that way and I was a little bit more laid back, But I can't. I have real difficulty controlling that. I can't control that.
Yeah, I think we both kind of disclosed some stuff. I kind of embrace it. I kind of like, all right, bring it on, motherfucker. When the thing comes on at me, and I know it's going to come, and it's just like I got to put the armor on because it's coming. And like COVID was a great example too. There's a common theme, I think.
That COVID, what we call the COVID weekend,
the COVID
must
weekend
have been a bitch for you.
Well, it was. It's the that's anxiety on steroids. Now, both of these things, by the way, the two big mental freight trains I can recall, COVID and probably this project that we just went through. This is a tough project.
Right.
There was a theme going through both of them. Anxiety related.
Sure.
COVID was, what if someone comes in and says you got to shut down, and then all the implications with that.
Now, when you say shut down, you're talking about everything that we had to do to get permits, get the right contractor.
COVID was about, does the government shut down?
Oh, you're talking about COVID. Okay, right. I'm sorry.
But that was the same thing. That was government shutting down business. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean if that happens? So my freight train was like, are they going to shut us down or are they not going to shut us down? We're a blue state. We're not a red state. They're shutting down restaurants. Does that mean and it's like, if they shut us down, can we still continue to operate and take orders and take deposits? Well, will the customers think we're going out of business? How do I put up a bond? Can it be $1 million bond? Do I got to show them my bank statement? We're not going to go out of business. I'm not going to let it fail. And it goes on and on and on. It just doesn't stop, right? But it was the theme through that was, it's out of my control. If they shut us down, there ain't nothing I can do about it. Now, we got to manage around that if they do. Now, fast forward, they didn't shut it. Manufacturing was kept open in Jersey, but I hurt like hell for the people that were shut down just because they were classified a certain way, whatever that was.
Yeah, but wait a second. This is important. You've said this a couple of times now. You said, you know what? The bottom line is, I know that I can't control it. Well, you may know that you can't control it. You may actually sit in a chair and say, well, I can't control this. That doesn't make you feel any better.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't make you. I'm sorry. When people say, well, listen, worrying, the Bible. There's a whole thing in the Bible about worrying, okay? You're not supposed to worry. It's tantamount to being sinful if you worry. I'm sorry. Tell that to my head. Tell that to my brain. You can't, it doesn't go away, okay? Now, some people deal with that by going out for a run. Some people go, but that's what I wanted to interject. You may have thought that, and you may have told yourself that, but that doesn't dampen the anxiety. One fucking iota.
Yeah, you're right. And this one was also, there was a trace of inspection or other people coming in saying, you didn't do this right, therefore these bad things can happen. And then the freight train takes off and puts it on steroids and goes down the road, and the freight train goes on. And letting that thing play out. There's probably better solutions than what I've done. I haven't gone to therapy, haven't done medication.
Right.
I just let the thing ride out through physical activity. Now, by the way, if I didn't go for that walk, the freight train's going to come. Right, so if I just jumped in the car and drove an hour and a half, that would not be as productive as letting the thing play out on a walk so I can get in the car. And now I'm in the car and I went through the exhaustion, so the stop of the freight train, and now I'm firing on, all right, what's got to get done? Let's think. The other thing that has helped with this is the infamous word gratitude, right? So back to Mr. Connolly, who we talked to, I opened up the podcast with.
Right.
There's a guy, 25 years in the Coast Guard, hearing his story and about teamwork and mission and values. And he was tying that into Paverart and some of the parallels between, being on a ship to Alaska when there's a disaster that happens on a ship, where he said something to the effect of, and we're going to publish this soon, kind of like you guys. You're a small team of 8 people. You're all working towards a common goal. Everyone's got different responsibilities. I'm like, Jesus, this guy's unbelievable, right? So, and I'm like, what a blessing to have that guy spend 45 minutes with us.
Sure.
And talk about the project that we engaged with him on for 3 months. And then I thought, what a blessing it was for Dominic to talk about so-and-so's got anxiety issues. And yeah, okay, my mind went to the negative, dark place right away. But now I'm here, and I brought this up to you. And hey, if this helps one person, if someone else's brain is a little bit neurodiverse or whatever you want to call it, and it actually helps people kind of realize it, there might be some benefit there. And your thing with, you're beating the shit out of yourself for missing a customer call or whatever the topic is.
It's not that trivial. It's worse than that. Look, it's a customer call. I mean, if that happens once, who gives a shit?
Right.
That you really truly shouldn't worry about, and I normally wouldn't. But but it goes deeper than that. It actually it's ingrained in my.
It can be debilitating.
My medulla oblongata or wherever that stuff gets
Right.
stored. But that's why that you touched a nerve when you said what you said. What started this discussion was it's weird that it started this discussion too, because you had just gotten off the phone with your wife Kim about something in regards to business. Anyway, one of the business here, Paverart business. But there's a family member that's going through a challenging time right now. But that family member's come to the realization, I need to seek some help on this. And that was a wonderful observation on that person's part. I mean, I guess the point of this discussion is what affects you affects other people. And when you're affecting other people, you need to do something to affect a change in yourself for the better, for the positive. If in fact what's going on in your head or my head is affecting someone else in our periphery by, I don't know, it could be snapping to anger quickly or being impatient or something along those lines. That's not productive. Okay, that's not productive. That's not good. And it can be much worse than that. It can get a lot worse than that. And seeking help is why do we look down on that?
It's crazy.
Okay, your knee-jerk reaction to the anxiety thing that Dom brought up. Look,
is that a common reaction, by the way, for dudes? And I think there's a male-female dynamic here too.
Had that been brought up to me, now I may not have said something because he's not my son, but right. I might not have said something out loud. But in the back of my head, I'm like, come on, right. Is this really what this is all? Or are we creating this with social media?
Right.
Well, some of it maybe we are, but you never know. And that's not the point. The point is, if it bothers you, if it's something that's hurting you mentally, you need to do something about it. And we need to help you do something about it.
Yeah, I think here's where an assumption could help. As I think about it, if we just assume everyone's fighting their own war in their brain, it's different for every person.
Sure.
It could be family issues. It could be 30 things they're struggling with.
Right.
They might not know it in the front of their brain, their cortex or not, but everyone's got their own struggle. And in business, the question is, do the leadership and their teammates have an empathy or at least a basic crude level understanding of this person versus that person?
Great point.
And, we try to understand what's going on with people's lives, all to varying degrees. If people are willing to share, that helps. But if you go with that premise, which I think is probably a healthy premise, everyone's fighting their own fucking war. We just don't know what it is, but it's there, right? It could be 30 different issues, but that's probably not a bad spot to start. And it's probably also not a bad goal to say, can I understand it a little bit? Or over time, get to know the people a little bit better so you know what that is.
Right, exactly.
And again, I don't consider this a war that I have, but it is a wiring mentally that's probably a little different than the average person. And it's, like I said, it's a freight train where, and it goes, and I think it's more of it's part of my natural wiring. I don't think it's a weakness. It might be, maybe it explains a little bit of drive I had to do some things. I don't know, but I've accepted it. Look, there is, if I didn't have a strategy, I might have had a heart attack at 38. I am pretty convinced of that. I wouldn't say it's stress inducing, but it can't be healthy if you don't.
Oh no, it's stress inducing.
When the mind goes like that, and when I describe that ping pong, right. I can kind of picture it in my head. And I say double it, and then that's kind of the brain. So sure. I don't know if that paints a picture, but it's kind of like that.
Those things that trigger whatever physical and mental reactions that we have, whatever those triggers are, everybody's got different ones, and some of them are tamped down, some of them are more obvious and out front. And most of us learn to deal with them, whatever they might be. If they're minor, they're probably easier to deal with. If they're major, sometimes you need to be convinced that you need to see a professional. I mean, there are professionals out there. There's people that can help you with this.
Can you recount Jonathan's little thing that we learned at lunch today? His story about coming here? What you learned about that? His coming to America story.
For those folks that are listening to this podcast, Jonathan is one of our newest employees. He's doing a very good job. And he's from El Salvador. Born in the States, lived here a year. Parents moved him back to El Salvador. And that's where he lived for 15 more years until he was sent back to the United States at the tender age of 16, not knowing one word of English. Okay. Jonathan is now 27. We won't go any deeper than that. But
comes here at 16 without a lick of English.
But what I got from his story was he came from a very strong family unit, okay? Mom, sisters, came here to live with his uncle, who, by the way, is also employed by Paverart. Juan Carlos, the infamous Juan Carlos. I love Juan. But the challenges that he had, I can't even begin to describe what they are, at least in my terms. I can't compare anything in my life to that. We all have challenges, but not like that. And this young man landed on his feet pretty successfully. In fact, very successfully. If you look at his, his goals, and he freely talks about that right now. By the way, we wound up hiring him away from, when he first started here, he started to work part-time, 3 days a week. And he worked the other 2 days, or maybe a few other days during the week at Whole Foods. And we got really busy. We realized that this young man is the real deal. And you offered him a full-time job. And he had enough sense to take it. He really liked this place. For some reason, he really liked this place. And we came to find out today that, he likes you and I. He likes the guys he's working with. He loves the product. He loves the challenges in learning how to build these things. Where did that come from when at 16, you're shipped over to the United States,
right?
Coming to live with an uncle that you have not seen or heard from, on a regular basis, virtually ever. And Juan becomes your male representative, that the guy that you look up to. And I just an amazing story.
And hearing him talk about 16 without a lick of English, let's say that's a sophomore in high school.
Right.
Kids aren't the most tolerant, forgiving, welcoming
I know
kids,
what you were getting at
right?
now. Yeah, I got you. Exactly. Yeah.
So you're sitting in a lunchroom by yourself for whatever reason, lack of acceptance, not knowing enough English, all this stuff. What does that do to harden the backbone of a kid?
What did he say? What did he say? Now I see why you asked the question. Because I asked him that question. What I said was, one of the fears that parents in the United States have, and I don't give a shit what anybody out there says. I don't care. I didn't care when I said to parents, your kid's 14, get him a job in the summertime,
That's right.
and a real job, something where he can work and actually make a living, sweat a little bit.
Get off the couch.
Yeah, I don't care what they say. Who cares? But the whole idea behind this with him was he sat in that lunchroom by himself, could barely speak English, if not at all, by himself. And his position was, I don't care. I'm better than you. Look what I had to do to get here. Look what I'm doing. You don't want to talk to me? That's fine. You don't want to be my friend? That's okay. I can live with that. All right? I can deal with that. But the way he dealt with it was, screw you. Okay? And that, for some reason, that just appeals to my sensibilities. I like that part of the story because it takes balls, it takes guts, it takes an intestinal fortitude that a lot of kids in this country just don't have.
Right.
They don't have, especially at 16. And we saw one at 18, and what that was all about. that was nowhere
Fun.
near what Jonathan brings to the table. That was a amazing story. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, think about it. I said, as a business leader, owner, whatever, or manager, it probably helps to operate under the premise that everyone's got a mental fight that they're dealing with.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Replace that word of mental fight with story. In the case of Jonathan, that kid's got a story. We just got to learn what the hell it is.
Yeah.
Now that we know a little bit more about it, and we can picture that 16-year-old kid fluent in Spanish but doesn't know a lick of English, sitting alone in a lunchroom by himself, and now seeing him as a young man at 27.
Sure.
And seeing what he's capable. Would you bet against that kid's future?
Hell
No
no.
fucking way.
No way. Absolutely no way.
Right. So what if we don't slow down enough to have lunch together? And I just saw you, and I invited myself in.
Right.
Yeah, because I'm like that, and we start asking him questions. So okay, this wasn't a mental health issue. This was learning the personal story.
Right.
We know a little bit more about that kid and what he's been through. And
But
boy,
if there
isn't
had
that
been,
interesting?
if there had been one,
We would have learned that.
it may have presented itself during that discussion. Quite frankly, it was just two guys having lunch.
Yeah, this is a human aspect, I think, of business. And this whole mental health thing kind of undercuts a lot of it.
Right.
Maybe it's the noise that gets in the way of getting real with people, forming relationships. We talked about this with Ken. The human part of business is the most challenging. They don't go into a spreadsheet. You can't put a person's DNA into a spreadsheet.
Exactly.
Understand how to deal with them. It's messy. It's fucking messy. So the story of Jonathan, the mental health issues that we talked about, I mean, that's all part of the mess of trying to lead.
It is part of the mess, but it's a good mess. And who's he having the conversation with? He's here 3 months, maybe 4, maybe 4 months. He's having it with the general manager and the owner of the business. That's
Small business.
how often. Yeah, how often does that happen? Even in small business, how often does that
Let's
happen?
get arrogant here. Let's get overly confident. Your point, a great point. Small business general manager, and oh, by the way, co-founder, he's talking to.
Yeah.
Myself as an owner, and 16-year-old kid with that story, now 27, sitting in front of us. And oh, by the way, he's listening to a podcast on financial management or an audiobook.
Yeah, he was talking about
And he's
that.
giving us our perspective.
An
He's asking us about
audio
that,
book.
right? Because he's probably multitasking or doing. He's being more efficient doing that. And I'm thinking, you don't bet against this kid. And a company like this that's
Right.
going to mentor and sit down. You can give me any college-educated kid in the world that was born in America that does the conventional path. I'm going to bet on this kid. I really am.
Amen.
And again, that's going off into a different direction. But the opportunity, if you get into that human connection stuff, whether it's mental health, the story, and trying to get a little bit of the DNA, I would not bet against a kid like that in the right environment. That's the key. So
Exactly.
education, mentorship, hands-on experience with the combination of that story coming here to America, it's magical what can happen. And I can't even predict what can happen. But I know it's in the right environment, nurturing it, that thing's going to explode.
Well, that was one of those discussions that we've had with an employee that was really, really, really productive. We've had other discussions with other employees, those with addiction issues, those who have just gotten out of prison. We've talked about this a little bit. Not much and not enough, but you and I have learned a ton about what goes on behind the scenes with a lot of this, and there's nothing really pretty about it, okay?
It's hard.
You talk about people that have a challenge to make it through the day. Those people have a challenge to make it through the day. And that's just, I love the Band-Aid or the bandage we like to put on these types of problems. Well, we need to be a little bit better in recognizing the mental health issues in this country. Thank you. Okay. That means absolutely freaking nothing.
Right.
Okay. What does mean something is when you try to do something about it. Now, I'm not a shrink. I don't have the magical answers, but I can talk and I can listen. And when you hear the story of some of these guys, and you learn to tell which ones are lies and which ones are truthful, it's a very, very telling story. And we had challenges with that with some of our employees, but we gave it a go for a long time. we don't really have anything like that. We don't really have any of those, any employee like that right now. And the two newest employees we have are both from El Salvador. Okay, and they're both offshoots from a contractor who's done a lot of work for us here. A terrific guy. Every time, his name is Victor. Okay, for those of you that need a name, his name is Victor. Every time Victor comes in the office, Mike, how are you? Comes in, shakes my hand, gives me a hug. Victor, I'm doing great now. Every time you come in the door, it puts a big smile on my face.
Isn't that amazing?
And Victor has never said no. I don't think Victor can say no. I think that's Victor's Achilles heel. He can't say no. But the two gentlemen, most recent hires that we've gotten, are part of his family. There's nothing. The only challenge they have is loving their families enough. Okay? Oh my God, could we all learn a lesson from that? Could we all learn a fucking lesson from that?
Didn't we do an episode on customer service and how shitty it is?
Oh.
And you summed it up beautifully. Victor comes in and the smile comes across your face. He elicits that feeling. I'm good now. You know he's going to solve a problem. He gives you the fist bump, the hug.
Right off the bat.
And we're feeling good right away.
Yeah.
I mean, shouldn't we take a lesson from this guy? I mean, this guy is writing a book on how to do business the right way. And by the way, we got his nephew, his brother.
Right.
And you think it's any... As you get a team around you like this, it's directly related. You start to really kick ass once you get the team around you and the culture and kind of the feel.
Sure.
I mean, it's a rhythm. It's a vibe.
Yeah. And you bring up a great point because that's it's easier to do things when you're trying to manage the business, when you have people that are like that. I mean, they've got great work ethic standards. You got
to get messy.
They're looking for things to do. They need, in whatever direction they need is just direction because the business needs to get this done, that done, and that done. And they will do it. They're not only smart enough to do it, they're probably smarter than what's required to be done. And they come up with suggestions. They do a lot of stuff on their own. To be honest with you, I don't think we've ever had that at Paverart, except when we were really stripped down to the core.
What if we learn about Jonathan's 16-year-old story, his immigrant story, his life, where he's been? What if we learn about that a year from now? Isn't that a versus today? Isn't that a massive missed opportunity?
Tremendous missed opportunity.
And whose fault would that be if that happened?
Well, and you never know. He might have gone someplace else where he was looking to do something or looking for feedback or whatever. You never know that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can't. It's a what do you call that? It's a hypothetical or whatever it is. It's
a hypothetical. That's exactly right. It's a hypothetical. But
it's a counterfactual.
Oh, there you go.
Even more fancy than hypothetical.
I'm going to write that down.
But
I got to use that word sometime.
The counterfactual of Jonathan, we will never know. But it is a massive missed opportunity if that conversation happens later in the game than today.
That's a great point.
But you got to get messy. And all that facilitated it was he shared an audiobook, lunch, and that was kind of it. And there's just three humans around a table shooting the shit.
Yeah.
And a question that said, tell me about your story coming here. And then we just shut up and listen.
Well.
And now our mindset goes to a place, our mental view of a kid with that story goes to a different place. Where I'm like, I wouldn't bet against this kid. We just got to figure out how to nurture it and treat it like a little fire that's going.
Right.
Throw a little kerosene on it. And a little bit more.
Yeah.
And a little bit more over time as he catches up to what we want to throw at him.
Yeah. Well, we're fortunate that neither one of us is scared of doing that. We're not concerned about somebody coming up and biting us in the ass and taking our job and all that other nonsense that you...
No politics.
Look, you were in the C-suite. You were in all that. Kenny's in that right now. But Kenny, I'm referring to my brother Ken. You had a chance to build what you wanted. He had a chance to, be a significant contributor to building what he thought was the right way to run the business that he's in right now. That's we've done that here every day. It's maybe a little easier in a smaller business than a big one like that. Actually, got so many more people. But that was a great lunch. It was a really good lunch. I usually eat lunch by myself.
Yeah, and I think that like the mental health, when you got two business guys on mental health, that topic, I have no answers for it. I just know what works for me. And I do think the stigma is a problem in business. If people have their own war that they're fighting in the brain, and they may or may not have a strategy, but you as a leader, if you don't know about it, or you don't understand the story of the 16-year-old kid coming here, people are fighting with their hands tied behind their back. I've said it a gazillion times in this probably every podcast I say the same thing. The bell curve, you got 10 to 20% that grow, 10 to 20% that are going to go out of business, and then the majority middle that just flounders or kind of treads water, right? To get to that 10 to 20% that accelerate, I think is all around the human stuff. It's culture, it's humans, it's all the stuff that we kind of had at lunch today, and the recognition and the sharing of problems, and then trusting people, building trust. The fact that I could tell you this and not feel like you're going to judge me, and vice versa, I think you feel that way about me.
100%.
Massive advantage.
Right. No question about it. There's no look. Well, we all have faults. You look inside, you'll realize that far from perfect is Mike Bull.
Sure.
Right. Depending who you talk to, farther and farther from perfect. But this brings up an interesting point. How many interviews have we done in 5 years?
Oh, I hate to even think.
But they're usually no more than 2. All right? Usually after 1, we have a pretty good idea, because we're not hiring for, vice presidents here, but the people that we're hiring are expected to take on responsibility on their own, and work their jobs on their own with limited with a limited injection of management. Okay, I'm not lording over these people all day long. You're not lording over these folks here all day long. There's a certain amount of responsibility that they're expected to take. I can usually tell after one interview whether this person's got that kind of thing in them. But again, it's one interview. All right, it's just one interview. And I can't crawl into your psyche and figure out what's going on. I've got a couple of good friends close friends that are looking to get work, and these are professional people. Folks, professional being defined as they've got high level degrees. They've been in positions of authority in the past, and they're looking for a new job. That's the interview process is 4, 5 interviews.
Right.
Explain that to me.
Right.
You should know after the 5th interview or 4th interview, you should know everything about that person. I can go to Greg and I, my cousin Greg and I, one of my closest friends in the world. We've talked about this in the past. You can put us at any show, at any venue, at any city in the United States, and in 20 minutes, everybody around us is friends.
Right.
They're all friends, okay? We're all carrying on. We're all having a good time. And Greg and I aren't even talking to each other. We're talking to all the people around us. I know more about them by the time that show's done than I know about some of the people we interview for these jobs, okay? And that's a negative statement. That's not a positive statement. That's a negative statement. Yes, it's part of our personality. It's part of our makeup. And let's also, it's, by the way, been doing this for a hell of a long time. Going to shows and just being around. And our family is like that. Everybody's friendly and outgoing and open, and it's a great way for a family to be. But when you have to go through 4 and 5 interviews, explain that to me. You went through that. What is that all about?
It's exhausting.
What do they learn about you? Are they looking specifically for negatives that are going to crop up? Are they taking notes from they're looking at notes from the first interview, and when they're doing the second interview, they're looking to see if you're going to give them the same answer to make sure that you're not bullshitting them or lying to them? What is that?
It's a degree of corporate hazing.
Corporate hazing.
Don't you think? Think about it.
I mean, that's a great term, but I'm trying to absorb that.
Think
Corporate
about it.
hazing.
Take the person that you described. Advanced. She's got an MBA from a school. Doesn't matter what school. She's had some jobs. Maybe they're a director of marketing or communications or whatever it is. VP. They got a deep resume. They've achieved some things, and now they got to go through 4 or 5 interviews, and they got to come back. And now they got to meet with this team. Now they got to meet with this group of individuals. Some companies, and I was one of them, I'd make people do a case study. I want to see them kind of analyze and give them a little bit of time. I want to see them I want to kind of simulate a real world thing.
Well, see, now I get that.
Right.
Go ahead.
But it's the thought process is, number one, you're going to wear them down and start to get to the real person, which you never will. But the thought is, if you see them multiple times, maybe in different situations,
sure.
One great thing is get them out to dinner, see how they treat the waiter or waitress. Mm-hmm. If they're rude to the waiter or waitress, that's a tell right there. It's kind of like a date. If my daughter goes on a date, the first thing I would say is see how they treat the waitress. Do they even look them in the eye? If they don't, that might not mean they're a bad person, but that's a tell right there.
Keep going. This is great insight. This is great insight.
Get them out of the environment and how they treat service people. How do they tip? How do they? And then these aren't, by the way, binary that if they do this, get rid of them. But it's a different environment. You're trying to get different looks, different angles, right?
Gotcha.
But you're trying to get them to a situation where you can try and simulate. The thought process is the more you hang in with them, you're testing their mettle, their determination, all with the intent of hire slowly and fire fast. That's the theory. Does it work? Does doing that versus an accelerated process work? I don't think so. I've interviewed a ton of people in my career, hired a bunch of people, and my batting average might be in the 30% success rate.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't think
that's 30%.
If people are honest with themselves, most people hire people they know. They've had some experience, their network,
sure.
Right? So you bring somebody in that you know. The hardest thing in business is to assess talent when you don't know them. You're looking at a resume, you're having a conversation, maybe you have 3 or 4 conversations, maybe you have 5 people meet with the person, and you're trying to collect all that to reduce the risk that they might not be successful.
Gotcha.
I don't know. It's never worked I've tried personality tests, case studies, the group interview, different situations, and my batting average hasn't moved no matter what I've tried. So now some people would be critical and say, yeah, you're not doing it the right way. All right. Well, I've got a deep experience and I've tried a lot of different things.
Sure. And
that lever, that magical combination, personality tests, you can kind of try and get a right fit. You can see if a person's not a fit for the role that you're hiring for.
Right.
You shouldn't use personality tests, in my opinion, to say yay or nay. You're trying to use that for fit and communication styles and working with them and acclimating them in the positive way. I'm of the mindset, you don't really know until they start. But in 90 days, you're going to be projectable. If you were to hire and go into a role and you grind away for 90 days, that might be your best behavior, but you are projectable after 90 days. Gotcha. I do see that, but not until you're in there, right? Mm-hmm. So the successful people, one of the most successful people that's ever worked with me, shout out to Steve Lewis, a good friend of mine. Hired him at Sara Lee, and we're good friends. One of the best by far. Wasn't a great interview. If I went on just the interview, wouldn't hire him, to be honest with you. By far, one of the best. I mean, off the charts, creative, great salesperson, dynamic individual, great people person. I would trust him to be a surrogate parent to my kids. That's what I think of him. If all I went on is the interview, what a massive opportunity of a beautiful, talented human being I would have lost. So there's an example of interviews are not really a great tell. And that, by the way, I've had the opposite. Decorated resumes, dynamic, great at the case study, and they flame out quick. So I don't know. Maybe my experience is odd, but I think it's really, really hard.
In your background and experience with this, can you tell if someone they may be good, they may have all the proper bona fides on paper, but can you tell if someone during that multi-interview process has, mental health issues?
No, I can't.
Interesting.
How would someone assess me? Do I have a mental freight train issue, if you call it an issue? Would you be able to pick that up?
I've known you for 5 years. That's the first time you've ever brought that up.
I don't know if it was surprising or not, but if you think about it, maybe it makes some sense. But I don't know if you can pick that up on an interview. You interviewed me when I came in to buy the business. You had an opinion based on a lunch and maybe an hour and a half discussion, things like that.
Well, you shine because most of the other guys were slugs.
That's hard. Look, interviews
that's a very unkind way of putting that.
Look, if I'm coming up and I was confident in what I was capable of doing,
right,
And I was going through that process that you're talking about. Now, maybe it's different for me because I've been in a number of jobs and different leadership positions. I would not, I wouldn't have, I don't know if I would have the patience for that process. What I would say is, look, if I knew I was good at the job, if I was interviewing for a job I knew I could knock out of the ballpark,
Sure.
I would say, here's, how about this? Why don't we save the bullshit? Make me interview with who you need to interview with, but put me on a payroll. Or how about this? If I was really confident, how about I work for free for 30 days and then pay me at the end because I'll be the best hire you ever had. I'm that confident, right?
It's a really interesting point.
Either you hire me, because look at my resume, look what I achieved. If you don't believe in that, all right, throw that out. If you don't want to get the opinions of your team, but what risk do you have at that point? And that's how confident I am. Now, is that, can people afford to do that? So you get into all different dynamics.
Probably not. In most
if you're
cases.
confident in your ability and you know you can do that job, and you're subjecting yourself to 5 rounds of interview, boy, you are abdicating the control of your future to all these people who don't know you from Adam. You might get great rave reviews, but what you can't get is your ability in action, in the grind, in the stress. They're not going to be able to assess that, I don't think. Mm-hmm. Or they can randomly by, I just think you only know until you see them in action in the real world. That's it.
Well, that's the...
I'm probably outside of the mainstream in those opinions, I think. But the real world, how do you put someone in a stressful real world situation where the shit is hitting the fan, the customers are calling, whatever the role is, the machine's breaking down, the customers are calling, whatever functional stress there is,
right.
Multiply that by 30 and simulate that in an interview. Interviews are the most unnatural thing when you don't know a person.
True. Very unnatural. But those real world situations, we've had, in the last 6 months, we've had a couple of instances where there were days, and you and I both came to the same conclusion each time. Holy shit, how do we get through that? From the moment you came in the front door that morning.
You can rule out pretty easily. But how do you rule in?
Yeah, I got to write that down.
Now look, if someone's incarcerated,
you need to put that in a blog, by the way.
Yeah, if someone's been incarcerated, you kind of. One guy had a great line. Are you able to follow direction? Sir, I've been in jail for the past 3 years. If I didn't follow direction, I wouldn't have made it out. Right.
You can tell.
Great answer.
You can tell everybody.
I'll buy that.
Yeah. We can tell everybody that was my stupid question.
Mike, are you satisfied with that? Yeah, I'm satisfied with that. Right?
Yeah. I'm actually embarrassed now that I think about it.
What a great answer.
Oh yeah. Well, that's why he got hired. Because think about it. Shortly after that, he got hired.
Right.
Unfortunately, he didn't stick. But we had 4 good weeks with that guy. If you think about it, we had 4 good weeks. But you have any problem taking direction? To this day, I blush every time that story comes up. That was absolutely the stupidest thing I could have ever asked.
That's pretty fucking good.
What the hell were you thinking of? Shit. The man just spent 5 years in jail, for Christ's sake. Yeah, I can take direction. That's not a problem.
We went off on the interviewing thing, but one thing I would encourage people to check out a company in Yonkers, New York. I toured through their Greystone Bakery. They do a no background check interview, and they're predominantly hiring from the incarcerated community.
Right.
And their thing is, how do we find reasons to say yes, not no? So there's no application. They don't ask you if you had a felony. They don't ask you any of that because your own bias comes in.
Which means there's no judgment.
Right, there's no judgment, right? So they're going to take anybody. It's open hiring. That's the practice. Mm-hmm. And they've realized that they can train anybody to do their job. And background for a factory worker, a line worker, whatever it is, they've basically said, this doesn't mean anything. You got to see the person. You got to support them. You got to train them. But okay, if you're around kids, there's different things where you got to do some of that for legality purposes.
Right.
But
is it the nature of the job that they require in that particular business? Greystone Bakery?
I think there's an exception could be if you're running a daycare center, you probably have a fiduciary legal responsibility to ask those questions. But let's say you're not. Let's take them off to the side. The obvious risky type things like that, like daycare kids, comes to mind. If you ask that question, have you ever been convicted of a felony or a crime? You're trying that person all over again.
Yeah.
If they're
You've condemned them to.
You've given them a life sentence.
You're proliferating the condemnation that will keep them from getting a job.
If you're out, you've paid your debt to society. That doesn't mean you're a great person,
Right.
by the way. But if you ask that question, you're playing judge and jury all over again with their life.
Yeah.
So
And do you think that's debilitating? I think so. I think that's very debilitating to the person.
it really is. So you get into all these things about, I think the key word here is judgment, whether it's interviewing, you're judging that person. Are they going to be a fit for your company, for your role? And we're making judgments all the time, right? On people, on humans, on prospects of a new market.
Yeah.
Judgment, suspending judgment is probably one of those superpowers. And keeping an open mind to a person, to a thing, a market or whatever, is probably one of those good things. And we all do it. We all just make assumptions on the person that came to this school. They got to be smart. They got to be good, right? I can't tell you, when you asked about interviewing, I've hired plenty of people with MBAs from Ivy League schools. And my batting average, lo and behold, is no different than the people without a degree. Well, how do you explain that? These are smart people. They couldn't be. Harvard pre-screened them. Harvard only lets in 5%. I've hired Harvard MBAs that were flameouts. They clearly got the raw intelligence.
There's obvious reasons. There's the answers to that question is what I'm trying to say. There's a definite series of answers to that question. I just can't grasp one of them right now. But
I've seen Harvard MBAs at private equity firms destroy companies that were well run, and I've seen plenty of them, by the way, that the investment bankers, private equity guys go into a company and they screw it up what was working. And you can read it. The beauty about numbers is they tell a story. And when the numbers go up, that means something's working. When they go down, it means there's some things that have changed in the business. They're all explainable. But over 4, 5, 6, 7 years, when some of those smart people, highly educated, highly degreed people,
Sure.
and the numbers go down, maybe there's not a correlation between your education and your pedigree and your ability to generate results. Maybe we should throw out all that thinking, kind of like the job application. Have you ever been convicted of a felony? That's putting you into a bias or a fear or whatever.
right off the bat.
The Ivy League MBA/degree
Sure.
is also putting you in a frame of mind that, all right, that's better than not having it. So, and I get why people do it, self-select, all of that, but I'm telling you, the correlation between results and pedigree is a lot looser than what people think it is.
Probably closer. If there's I can understand the mentality that says, well, I don't want that person working here. I don't want to take that chance. There's going to be too much effort involved in trying to make sure that person's doing the right thing. Well, okay. Well, in a lot of what we've said here, there's folks that don't have those kinds of those challenges. You'd be surprised how much time you have to work with them too, and that's just not going to go away. We require a unique eventual skill set here, okay? It's hard to determine from a person's background whether they're going to have that skill set after they've been here for 3 or 4 months. Part of that skill set is to assume responsibility for the job that you're doing in a very proactive way. Don't be passive. Don't wait for somebody to come around. You're standing around with your phone in your hand, texting your girlfriend because nobody's come around and said, hey, I need you to do this now. You need guidance, you need management, but you need somebody that's kind of has that self-starter mentality. That's what makes this place tick, and we've got a lot of those guys in place now. Okay, and that's important. It takes a little bit of the pain, and not the pain, I shouldn't say the pain, but it takes a little bit of the daily responsibility off of you and I, so that we can go do those things that we're supposedly good at. Okay, and those things that we're not taking away from that skill set that we supposedly bring to the table. But the one thing, and I've come full circle on this. I mean, you talked to me about this 20 years ago. No way am I hiring somebody like that. No way. Mm-hmm. It's just, no. We got a job to do here. We don't have time to be messing with that bullshit. It's not bullshit, okay? And when you get someone who sticks and they get it and they really turn their lives around, look what they've done.
Yep.
And all they needed was a chance, okay? the problem is, I think, in this country is that there's too many people that you just get beaten down for so long. You have that beaten down dog mentality where you just cower in the corner and it's kind of an FU attitude. And I don't trust this guy anyway. He can't be that nice. I'm just going to do what I have to do, to get my next, pack of cigarettes, okay? Or, my next, whatever it is that I need to have. You got to break through that. It's not easy. We actually have a guy here that kind of broke through that. And it's not, we're not St. Mark and St. Michael here, okay?
Right.
Far from it. I mean, I am the exact opposite of St. Michael, okay? I won't speak for you because that would be judging. So, but what I can say is I've learned that I'm no better than the next guy. I'm just not.
Well, let me try it. I wrote some notes here. Let me try and wrap up.
Sure.
What I think we talked. We covered a lot of ground here for the first podcast back with you and I.
Right.
Two premises that I think people can be well served to kind of keep in mind. Mm-hmm. One is assume everybody is fighting their own version of a mental battle.
Right.
And number two, if you can learn what that is or their personal story, good things are going to happen. Can't predict what it is, but the quicker you can start to learn what makes them tick, their personal story, the Jonathan example.
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing. You want to kind of be open-minded to having that openness. And then obviously that goes with that. Whatever the mental battle is that you personally are fighting or somebody else, what is your strategy to deal with it? And it ain't going to go away on its own. Gave you mine. It's the 4 a.m. walk that I've got to get past 60 minutes or the brain ain't going to fire, right?
Right.
And then, against human nature, to suspend human judgment. Hard to do. To suspend judgment on that person, see them in action, have an open mind. I mean, that's the notes that I have on the recap of this discussion. I mean, what did I miss?
Well, what's the crux of the whole thing? What's the main human attribute that you have to kind of get into all of this? You've got to be honest. You got to be honest with yourself. You got to be honest with other people. I think that's what I got. That's what I got from that.
Yeah, look, and this conversation doesn't happen if there's not a trust in relationship where you're vulnerable enough to at least say it, right?
Exactly.
So you got it, and males aren't inclined to do it. I'm not. But I have the ultimate respect and trust for you, so I was happy to just shoot from the hip and say it, and you're like, there's value here.
That goes both ways, and I thank you. It's nice to hear that, but trust me when I tell you that goes both ways. So we've talked openly about a lot of things that we will not talk about on this podcast. But this was one of those things that I thought, and I think you thought it too. It needed to be said. It needed to come out because how many guys out there? Look, you said it. What's the percentage of small businesses in this country where there's one, maybe no more than two guys that are running the business and they started it from scratch? What was it, like 6%?
That actually sell, you mean, or
no? That's I'm talking about the startups.
Oh, that are successful.
Yeah,
it's low single digits.
Yeah, low single digits, and there's probably a ton that drives that into the low double digits. That when you add them all up, there's a percentage of them that are not successful. But those people are wired differently. They just are. And they may be wired differently in some ways in a negative mental health way. But for whatever reason, it works for whatever it is that they're doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, we see this all the time. We see this all the time with these super competitive, business winners that are billionaires. And, you look into their background like, whoa, my God, how did he get out of bed in the morning? Mm-hmm. Anyway, you were going to say something.
Well, look, there's traits. The bell curve is the minority of the excellent businesses that are growing,
right?
That are sustainable, that are sellable, that are investable. It's less than 20%. It's just the facts. It's the normal bell curve of life.
Right.
And success among those groups of people leaves clues. There's some common traits, as there is among the people that go out of business in the middle that, kind of stay stasis. There's traits among all of them that are learnable. None of this is rocket science. I don't believe to get into the mode of success or growth, to get to that far right end of the bell curve.
Sure.
None of that is rocket science. Is it easy? Hell no, it is.
No.
It is not easy.
No.
It requires skill, talent, all the stuff that we talk about. It is fucking hard. Or else everybody would be there, growing at 30% a year, selling their business for a great multiple and retiring on the beach. Well, the world doesn't work that way.
No.
So you've got, there's all sorts of strategies. This podcast, we dive into, we say it on your opening statement. We're going to dive into all of that stuff. And that doesn't mean we're the model for it, by no means. We're just exploring it and sharing. If we think we can help add light to a topic or bring people into the conversation, that's success.
No, it's also, I think the podcast is a mental salve.
It's therapy.
It's mental.
It's good therapy.
It's mental salve. And, all right, well, you know what? We should probably wrap this up because we've done 2 of these today, and not much business has been conducted at Paverart as a result.
Let's go back to work.
But
good job.
What I can say to everybody out there were no animals harmed during the taping of this podcast, but, a couple of psyches might have been slightly bruised. So, but no animals were harmed because we're animal lovers here. No.
Signing off.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.